This is the day you have trained for, the day you have studied for. Utilize your superior skills, your superior intelligence.
Sit down, rodent!
Oh dear.
Sarah, baby! Oh, you were one fly.
Don't make me hurt you.
Learn to defeat your ruthless enemy, Steve of Hackensack.
Ryan, you're gonna get rude.
Shut up, quadruped.
SEGA Dreamcast. It's thinking.
Hello and welcome to another Retro Crazy. Once upon a time in a world of gaming long ago, there was a little console called the Dreamcast. Launched in Japan in 1998, it was Sega's last hurrah before calling it quits. But boy, was this a beauty. The Dreamcast was a rebel. It didn't want a flashy and expensive DVD-ROM like its cousins. It said, hey, I'm going to use this cool GD-ROM format. That's way cheaper, but just as good as CDs. And it did. But that's not all. This little guy was the trailblazer for online gaming. That's right, you could connect to the internet and play games with people from all over the world. It was like having a virtual party every time you turned on your console. But it didn't stop there. The Dreamcast was also the first console with built-in internet access. Take that, other consoles. Despite its groundbreaking features, the Dreamcast didn't quite hit it big in Japan. But in North America, that was a different story. The Dreamcast sold like hotcakes with over 500,000 units flying off the shelf in the first 2 weeks alone. But alas, all good things must come to an end. By March 2001, the Dreamcast was discontinued, with only 9.13 million units having been sold worldwide. But for those lucky enough to have owned a Dreamcast, it was a magical time. I mean, who could forget Crazy Taxi, where you could drive around like a maniac and pick up passengers to earn cash? Or Virtua Tennis, where you could pretend to be a tennis pro and smash that ball with all your might. And don't even get me started on Metropolis Street Racer. It was like living in a Fast and Furious movie. Sadly, like many others, I had to part with my beloved Dreamcast to fund my next console obsession, the PlayStation 2. But the memories remain, and the Dreamcast will always have a special place in my heart and wallet. Well, that intro this week was brought to you by ChatGPT. I decided why not put in what I'd written and see what it came up with, and that was it. So I hope you enjoyed that, a little bit different. So the Dreamcast has a number of issues once they get a little bit older. It has a battery which sits on the controller board. That's going to need replaced. There are potential issues with the controller stop working. There is a fuse on there. If that's gone, that needs replaced. The power supply can cause issues. It sits down here. And there are options available. You can get tiny little Pico PSUs to drop in, and they're great, but I like to keep things original, so I'll be doing a refurbishment of that. And that power supply normally is caused by a heat issue. It does have a cooling fan, but it's absolutely tiny. But again, I'm keeping this original. There are replacements out there that are much larger, using different fans, different bracketry, but I'm keeping this original. And the board itself is actually not generally too bad. So let's get this apart and let's see what we can find. Now, the Dreamcast is held together with 1, 2, 3, and the 4th screw is underneath this side panel. So let's pop this off, get the screws out, turn it over and lift the top off. And with the casing off, we get our first look at the inside of the Dreamcast. This is the GD-ROM. That comes off as part of this lower board. Here we have the main power supply and the control board with the battery that we're definitely going to be replacing. Let's get this apart, and I'll give the usual warning regarding power supplies.
Power supplies are dangerous. There are components in these that can hold a charge long after they're unplugged from the mains. So if you're unsure what you're doing, go seek professional advice.
Now, the first thing to remove is the power supply. We're going to undo this plug here. We've got one screw here and a second just here. And that's it as far as the power supply is concerned. It will feel like it doesn't want to lift. It will feel like it's absolutely rock solid, but it's held by these pins and it's a pressure fit, so it will be tight. There we go. And the power supply board comes out. With that out, this is simply an electrical shield to stop the underside of the board from shorting. Drop that to the side. You don't need to worry about the switch. That's literally just a switch with a cap on it. Next, we're wanting to disconnect this cable from one end or the other, it doesn't matter. There we go. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 screws will slacken this, and we've got the fan cable and connector just here, so that'll need disconnected as well. With that disconnected, you'd think this would just lift out, but it's all kind of caught and wedged in, so it does take a little bit of fiddling and this will lift out. And there is our control board. I am going to take everything off because I'm going to clean the casing. So let's just go through and show the disassembly of everything else. So your power switch, 2 screws, your fan and enclosure, and I will be reusing this, so I'll give it a clean out. While you think the front panel would lift out, it's actually underneath the shield, so don't try and force it just yet. There are 3 screws to remove, and we can take the GD-ROM out. With that done, the GD-ROM will actually lift out, but be aware there is a connector under here, so it can be a bit of a tighter fit because it won't feel like it wants to come out. Once it pops, you'll be able to see the connector. With that done, the remaining screws that we can see can now be removed. And now with the screws out, we should hopefully be able to lift everything out. We can remove the control panel cover, or the controller panel cover, and last we've got the lower shield. That leaves us a bare lower frame, which yeah, a bit grubby, so this is going to get a good clean. Now you will note there are a couple of thermal pads for a couple of the components on the underside, and we'll just pop this off so you can have a look at the main motherboard. You can see there are a number of electrolytics, surface mount, and we're not going to be replacing these at the moment because these all seem fine. Very small, very compact, and built, ironically, to a very cheap price point. Sega lost so much money when they did the previous consoles, the Saturn, etc., from development costs, etc. They stopped doing in-house development of the hardware and used off-the-shelf parts. Let's pop this back on and just put it to the side at the moment. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the controller board. I'm going to replace the battery and this electrolytic capacitor here. So let's do that now. Okay, so with those removed, I'm going to replace them. I have a replacement electrolytic, and I'm not replacing this like for like. I'm actually going to use this, which I got from Z Labs. You don't need to get them from Z Labs, that's just who I happen to use for this particular one. And what it does is it's a replacement for the original and replaces it with a button cell holder. So that goes in instead, and that allows us to use a 2032, which will slot in. So let's pop this on now. And there we are, that's all done. We've got the new cap in, we've got the new button cell battery holder, and we're going to check this fuse, which is down here marked F1. I want to make sure it's not blown. So we'll do a continuity test between these 2 points. So we're going to pop our meter onto continuity and diode test, and we get a beep to show everything's fine, and there's effectively a short circuit. I've turned this round, here's the component here, and that beep tells us the fuse is fine. If there was no beep, the fuse is blown, replace it. So with this board done, I'm going to pop it to the side, and we're going to look at the power supply next. So next we're going to look at the power board, and these are notorious for causing issues. For example, if you've been playing your Dreamcast and it'll suddenly just randomly shut down and restart, crashing the game for no reason, probably this. What happens is over time these can start breaking down and overheating, and the pins that come through, they're a friction fit, and through time, through the heat expansion, the spring clips will open up further and not put enough pressure on, so when it heats up it starts making intermittent connection, and that can cause a problem. Now a temporary solution could be, to bend these spring clips back in, but it is only temporary. Once they start failing, and you've either got to find a source for replacements or one of the sort of Pico PSU alternatives. So I'm now just going to desolder all these and we'll replace them. So now the board's all done and clean. It's a good few days later, and again thank you to Techie Kid on eBay, that's Martin, for a good selection of caps that I need, because as usual, specialised values that I have never used before. So let's get this recapped. And there we are, all done. That took about 10 minutes, taking my time, making sure everything went in. And one of the things I do, and you'll see that I've got a list here of values and locations, just a little diagram, and if I line that up with the board, and you'll see, for example, that if we look down here, you'll see that all these caps are marked. I've got the values, the voltage, and I'm marking the polarity as well, just in case it's not on the board. So I can quickly go back, check, there's the negative on that one, right hand side on this one, and that just allows me to quickly place everything, knowing exactly where it goes, assuming I haven't made a mistake in my drawings. This also helps me when I'm ordering, because I can mark on how many I need, and then you can see there's one blue tick, two blue ticks, and then a number of black ticks, and the black ticks are for the ones I've had to order. So that's how I do it. It helps me, and hopefully this should now all be ready to go back in. So with everything done, let's reassemble the Dreamcast. So now that we're ready to reassemble, the case has been cleaned. It's been through some hot soapy water with oxy action, just to make sure everything came up as nice as it could. I've given the case a good scrub. There's still a lot of scratches in the top, but you have to say, it does look a lot nicer. So let's pop the top off, and let's look at getting this back together. So if I've done my job right, that's now reassembled, and the theory is it should work. The fan has been taken apart, it's all been cleaned, so there's no dust, there's no debris, everything's ready to go. I've given the GD-ROM a cursory once over, just to make sure it's clean. Power supply is back in, ready to go. But we're missing the battery. Now the kit I've used is slightly different from normal. A lot of the cheaper kits come with a diode and just use a stock CR2032. It does mean that through time the battery will discharge, you will need to replace it. I went for the Z Labs kit, and if I am not very much mistaken, if I can get this packet open, this is not a CR2032. Let me zoom down and show you what it is. This is the ML2032, they're more expensive, but this is a rechargeable. So I don't need to worry about this going flat. I just need to make sure I get it the right way around. There's a marking on the board just down at the bottom here saying positive. The back of the casing is positive, so I'm able to just pop that open and drop that in. And now I've got the rechargeable. No other modifications to the board needed, so it keeps it a little bit more authentic just with a battery holder. Let's drop the top casing on. And there we go, assembled, done. Beautifully smooth now that everything's been cleaned and relubricated. The buttons are all fine, they've even got a little bit of play again. So the question is, does this work? However, before I answer that question, I kinda need a controller, and unfortunately this one has seen a lot of love. It's definitely a bit grubby, so I'm going to have to pop this apart and at the very least give the casing a clean. There is a little bit of damage to it, but that's unavoidable, so let's pop this apart. So that's it down as far as I want to take it. This looks like a series of possibly Hall effect sensors around here, and also for the left and right triggers. Now these, I've tried popping them out. I'm a little bit unhappy about the amount of pressure I've got to pop on them to get these to pop out, but they'll clean up nicely without needing to come out using some isopropyl alcohol. I can clean up all the contact pads, no problem. The rest will go into my standard mix of hot soapy water with Oxy Action, and that'll give these a good clean and a good scrub. These I will all clean up using isopropyl alcohol. So I will see you just in a short while when we come back and reassemble. Now that everything's clean, I've got a small broken edge, so I'm going to try and glue that back in, hopefully, and then we can rebuild. So that's gone on really well. Nice job. So let's rebuild. And there we are, all together, looking quite nice, much cleaner, and everything feels as it should. So let's go and do some testing. Okay, so here we are at testing. Apologies for the reflection. That's from outside. It's a nice bright sunny day. I can close the blinds, but it just turns the reflection a dirty yellow. So not so great. So let's change the source. Should be hopefully side AV. Let's see what happens when we power on. Well, I've certainly got a Dreamcast running. Shame the side AV is so bad. Okay, bear with me a second while I see if I can work out what's going on. There we are, it was a bad connection on the back of the cable. And it's asking me to set up the date and time, so let's see if this works. Yay, okay. Oh my goodness, what day is today? And there we are. It's working. Yay! Okay, not seen one of these for a while. So first thing I'm going to do before I do anything, I'm going to switch off. And you may wonder why I'm switching off. Well, I'm going to switch off and I'm going to disconnect the power completely. Alright, I'm going to hit power, that's trying to draw power, and that'll drain all the caps. I'm going to pop the power back in, and if you haven't guessed by now, I'm checking the battery, the real-time clock battery. Hopefully there was enough power for that brief time it was on. And let's see if it retained the memory setting or if I've got to keep it on for a bit more. And it remembered. There we go, real-time clock battery, working, done. I do have to say the Dreamcast fan is quite loud, so I will try moving out the way a bit from the fan and hopefully you can hear me a bit better. So what are we going to test this with? And here's hoping the drive works. It's detected the disc. I can hear it spinning up. That's taking longer than I remember it ever doing. I don't know what it's checking, but it's taking its time. I don't think that's finding it. This is a brand new copy I've just bought of, well, not a brand new copy, but it is a copy I've just bought of Crazy Taxi. I think the GD-ROM needs a little bit more work because it has now found it. So I think at the moment what I'm going to do is I'm going to eject the disc, power off, and give the head a quick clean. So I've now been down to my storage unit, and we know Crazy Taxi doesn't work, but I've brought a whole bunch of other things to try and just confirm that it's definitely the drive. So let's start at the beginning. And let's try Metropolis Street Racer. Okay, that's getting much further. Yeah, I'm going to guess that Crazy Taxi is unfortunately faulty, which is not great. So let's skip through the intro and let's try some gameplay. Oh dear. Okay, well, it's working. Superb. That's it done and dusted. Shame about Crazy Taxi, but such is life. Well, I hope you found this a little bit interesting, a little bit informative. So please remember to like and subscribe, hit that thumbs up. It really, really does help, trust me. And I'll see you in the next Retro Crazy.